It will definitely be remembered as one of the darkest days in Israel's history. An American warship is being deployed closer to our shores. The international community understands what Hamas did and stands very clearly against it. There is concern about the fate of Palestinian people on the ground, including in Gaza. Egypt is concerned about that. It doesn't want to export or import the Palestinian problems into its territory. Turkey's side has relationship with Hamas, and Erdogan is engaging with Hamas leaders, but it also improved its relation with Israel.
Hello and welcome. You're watching One India News. My name is Pankaj Mishra. The way things are transpiring in Israel in its offensive, in its retribution to the Hamas attack of Saturday, looks like all or nothing is on Israel's mind. But war, peace, and the ongoing affairs also bring with it certain signs of diplomacy, certain signs of global geopolitical changes. Diplomatic shifts are there. To discuss the matters further on how the world order is perceiving this offensive of Israel against Hamas, we are joined by Nimrod Goren, Senior Fellow, Israeli Affairs, Middle East Institute, and President, Mitvim Institute. Nimrod, thank you so much for speaking to us and taking time out from your busy schedule. You are joining us from Tel Aviv, and I presume that is rather quiet, in the wake of the recent massacre that Hamas has done. Share with us first things first here. The unity government has come up, which shows that Israel is speaking in one voice, no matter how many critiques you might have there in the domestic policies. But when it comes to national security, one voice that is speaking. What else is happening as of now as far as the ground forces, ground level movements is concerned, and the government level is concerned?
Everybody knows someone was injured, killed, captive, serving in the military in the south. So there is a lot of concern, and it's very personal. Nevertheless, Israelis are facing an unprecedented security situation. It's the biggest blow we got military-wise since the establishment of the country by an organization that nobody expected could do what the things that it did, both on the military level, but also in the atrocity level, the horrors of the things that we're doing. So that definitely brings Israelis together. It brings them together in mobilizing to support, to collect aid for soldiers, for families, but it also mobilizes more unity on the political level, as you mentioned. It's not a full-fledged unity government. It's one centrist party joining Netanyahu to at least have things managed a bit more reasonably, looking ahead into a possible ground offensive maybe next week, although it's not necessarily being agreed upon yet, and possible spillover to other fronts, especially in Lebanon. That is a thing that Israelis are very concerned of.
Absolutely. I wanted to know from you, the way the southern Israel was targeted by Hamas, and from the northern part of the Israel, Lebanon is also reportedly firing missiles into the Israeli territory. One development that is happening, I believe U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has just landed in Israel. How do you see U.S. involvement in this matter?
U.S. is very clear on its support to Israel these last few days. This is, of course, the continuation to previous American policies of supporting Israel, to the very strong alliance that Israel and the U.S. has for decades. But it's so clear, you hear President Biden speak and his personal affinity to Israel, and the words that he's saying to the Israeli public are very warmly received. So it's a sign of reassurance to the Israelis that the U.S. is standing clearly behind us, but it also has practical aspects. American security is being granted to Israel these days. An American warship is being deployed closer to our shores. So the sense is that Israel is not alone in that, and while it definitely has the capacity to defend itself on its own, it's good to have American backing, plus political support from other countries. In Europe, it's where the international community understands what Hamas did and stands very clearly against it.
Right. Contrary to the U.S. stand, Nimrod, the Arab world, it seems, is in a different zone altogether. And when it comes to gaining support of, say, the Iranian leaders, for that matter, Hezbollah, which has now come up as one of the striking forces, how do you perceive that is going to affect the scenario?
It's a bit of a dual thing going on, because on one hand, there is a lot of importance attached to the Palestinian issue within the Arab and Muslim world. the Palestinian cause, their aspiration for nationhood, for a Palestinian state. But what Hamas is doing is not the way to advance that. And most of the countries in the Arab and Muslim world are not fans of Hamas, not support the Hamas way of approaching politics, security, terror. So on one hand, there is concern about the fate of Palestinian people on the ground, including in Gaza, who are not members of Hamas. On the other hand, I think there is no support for Hamas, but kind of a reluctance from actually saying it out loud. So there's very cautious in the way Arab world is responding. We saw the Arab League convening. We saw a message condemning any injury of civilians from both sides. So it's kind of a balanced approach. They don't spell out Hamas specifically. Countries like the UAE and Turkey, their leaders did engage with President Herzog and made a call and delivered messages. Others are keeping lower profile, and some are looking for ways to mediate. Whether it's Qatar or Egypt, they traditionally play a role in attempts to solve such issues, especially when it comes to hostages and captives.
Talking of hostages and captive, Gaza, is out of power supply as of now. Last evening, only the power stations went dry, water, fuel, everything has been cut off. Israel says that it won't be restored, the supplies, unless the captives are being released. Any addition to that?
So the Israeli formula now being voiced by our government is humanitarian for humanitarian. If the Palestinians Gaza, Hamas wants Israel to give on the humanitarian front, they're expected to give as well and release those captive by Hamas in Gaza. Now, there will be a humanitarian issue that will be increasing as the Israeli attacks on Gaza continue. There will be more and more basic needs in Gaza that will need to be addressed. I think even if Israel does not want to deliver those on its own, and in a way it makes sense because the two sides are at war at the moment, it should enable other countries to provide the Palestinians on the ground with the assistance they need. So that's one thing that may happen. Plus, maybe a humanitarian corridor, and there's debate about possible cooperation with Egypt to allow some Palestinians to cross the border. Egypt is concerned about that. It doesn't want to export or import the Palestinian problems into its territory, but that's another option that could be relevant as time goes by.
How has the relations been between Egypt and Israel, given the proximity is closer, but historically there have been points of discontent also?
Of course, Egypt was once the biggest enemy of Israel. Just a few weeks ago, we marked like 50 years to the Yom Kippur War in 1973, which was the most serious war that Israel confronted against Egypt. 6 years after that war, by the way, Israel and Egypt signed a peace treaty against all odds. So I think what that example shows that even at times of deep conflict, there also hope for some change in the future. Now, Israel and Egypt have a very stable peace treaty going on for decades, despite all kind of hardships and ups and downs. And Egypt is traditionally playing the role of mediator on Israeli-Palestinian peace and on ceasefires in Gaza in close coordination with the Americans. This time, the relationship between Netanyahu and Sisi are good relationship, but there are some tensions. Egypt is now making claims that it provided warnings to Israel about the attack by Hamas, and that Netanyahu disregarded those. This is important for Israelis to know because there is a trust question about Netanyahu and his government. So that's a statement that Netanyahu does not like. On the other hand, the Egyptians do not like statements by Israeli ministers calling on Palestinians to go from Gaza to Egypt. So there are some tensions here, but overall, I think the strategic relations are very stable, and we will see Egyptians play a constructive role in trying eventually to end this cycle of war.
Right. Nimrod, three more players are critical here as far as the geopolitics is concerned: Russia, Turkey, and Syria. Now, IDF, Israeli Defense Forces, have just recently given out the information that ISIS flags were also seen when the massacre took place in the southern part of Israel. Now, this whole mix of, we know how Syria and Turkey were engaged in a battle by 2015, and that started the migration crisis. Do you believe that this kind of, conflict once again has that propensity to give rise to such migrational issues?
Because the equivalent between what Hamas did and ISIS is not only by the flag, it's something we see from the pictures, and it's becoming very common to understand that Hamas is not acting as a legitimate political group or military group working for its national interest, but rather engage in terror like ISIS.
Correct.
That's an important message that is now making the rounds. Now, on Syria, I think it's important to look at the role of the United Arab Emirates, that is now an ally of Israel and a country that wants stability in the region, and that conveyed messages to Assad to stay out of the war.
Right.
The threat is not from Assad, it will come from Hezbollah. Hezbollah has some forces perhaps also in Syria. So the big question is whether Hezbollah joins or not. Much of the American efforts is geared towards preventing that from happening.
Okay.
Turkey side has relationship with Hamas, and Erdogan is engaging with Hamas leaders, but it also improved its relation with Israel in the last couple of years. So it may be positioned in a way to help mediation efforts for humanitarian issues. It will not be the lead mediator because there is still a lack of trust in Israel on Erdogan and criticism from Turkey on what Israel is doing, but it would play a role more than it could in last rounds when it still did not have good relation with Israel.
So Nimrod, my final question to you, how would history remember this? How would it go in the history books, given the fact that many of the Israeli citizens are wanting to go for an eye for an eye?
Yeah, it will definitely be remembered as one of the darkest days in Israel's history. Okay, the amount of people killed is really immense. That's for sure. That's already there in the books. The other chapters can be written by us, by our people, in defining where this leads to. And the goal, I think, of people on the ground is to make sure that this will lead to an understanding that conflict is bad. It is a very basic understanding, but we need to find a way to go out of this situation to a path that will eventually enable Israelis and Palestinians a better future, a secure future, and a future of peace. But that's on the responsibility of people. It will not happen on its own. There are significant factors who oppose that, and those will need to be overcome in the political system of each country domestically.
Absolutely, Nimrod. It's a pleasure to speak to you. Thank you so much for breaking it down, the role of several players, both nationally and internationally, in this time of crisis that Israel is going through. Our prayers are with you, your family, with your nation and your countrymen. And thank you so much for speaking to One India News. Nimrod Goren there, Senior Fellow, Israeli Affairs, Middle East Institute, and President of Mitvim Institute. Trust me, Nimrod, it's people like you who enlighten the future generation. So please keep up the good work. And thank you once again.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the support. It's a pleasure being with you.